And what I realized is that I was constantly looking for external approval, was looking for someone to love me, someone to give me meaning, someone that would empower me. And yet, what I've learned through what you're sharing, this idea of actually the more I express what's inside, the vulnerability, the more strength I have. And actually, that was me being intimate with myself. Suddenly, those little conversations I'd love to have with a partner, I was having for me. I was able to express those things. You know what? I'm feeling insecure right now. People are like, oh, cool. Like, thank you for sharing that. Me too. You're a permission giver. Suddenly, I feel safe. So I feel comfortable. I can speak about my issues with you. And it just became like a momentum, a ball side rolling, and picking up this this energy. And suddenly, like, I am here today, recognizing that the most intimate I've been with myself, and I can now be that for my partner. I've called in someone that I can really love truly. And this is why, as much as men's work is important in this day and age, it's also women's work. It's also family work. It's also planet work. This impacts everything.
Hey, here we are. Welcome back, Mr. Peter Eugène Bennett. Is that correct?
Correctamundo. Thank you, Dorja.
Correctamundo. Welcome. Oh, man, I'm so glad to have you here. Thank you so much for making this happen at such short notice. Really stoked to have the opportunity to talk to you today, Peter. Man, we met just... was it 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, or something like that, in Berlin at the Sacred Sons Immersion, which was facilitated by you and your team. And so now I'm super happy that you're here. And I just thought, wow, this was really impressive for me. And I would love to talk to you a little bit about this thing, this men's work thing, Sacred Sons, and yeah, what brought you there. But perhaps in a few words, man, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, brother. Well, I like to begin by saying, shoo-wee! Aloha, broahas, brothers and sisters. Peter Bennett Eugène is my middle name, named after my great uncle. Checking in from Bethnal Green, East London. I am a men's work coach. I am a leader. I'm a trainer. I train other men and sisters in masculinity, in femininity, in the flow of energies, and also bringing us back home to our hearts, to our guts, through health and well-being modalities. So that's it in a nutshell.
Wow. You practiced that one. That's good. You've said that 1 or 2 times. That's amazing. Like, how concise. Yeah, man. How have you been, man? How did you go back straight to the UK, right? Yeah.
Yeah, brother. It's been nearly 3 weeks now. Super potent experience working with you and the brothers in Berlin. Really grateful for Sacred Sons, the Brotherhood, the organization that I work with. We are a global group of men. We call it the Brocelium, the Brotherhood, the mycelium network that connects us all. And I've been working with Sacred Sons for 2 years and a bit. And bro, to see it flourishing in Europe, I'm one of the heads, one of the leaders here in Europe. Been all over the continent, from Copenhagen to Lisbon, now Berlin. We were in Frankfurt last year. And be working with you brothers in Germany, seeing how much you can benefit from doing what we call masculine alchemy, getting into the body, feeling the emotions, transmuting, transforming stuck energy, stories like guilt, shame, regrets, turning it into power, into purpose, has been an honor. And bro, it's been a few weeks since we last connected. It was a journey getting home. Had a few different projects on the go, and it's feeling really grounded, man. Feeling really grateful. I'm here.
Yeah. Amazing. I think that's such a nice keyword, the feeling of being grounded, because that was also my perception during this immersion. That, I mean, feeling grounded is such a important feeling, especially for us men, I would probably also say. And my feeling was that you and all the other guys who were there present with us, facilitating and holding the space for us, were very grounded. And I guess that's what it takes to hold like this container for these super intense emotions that can come up in men's work, right?
Yeah, very perceptive, bro. You must feel this, right? Like even before you did this podcast, I bet you did something to get you into the moment, to get you into your body, to make you feel grounded, right?
Absolutely. For me, that's Qigong, man. That's Qigong and breathing, breath work, and connecting with nature, like these things. Definitely using the body, using the breath, and using nature. For me, that's the thing that always brings me back to myself when I get stuck in my head.
And that's such a good way to describe it. Like many of us, well, I do the same thing, brother. Like I have Qigong practice, I have a breathwork practice. I meditate. I find that was my first ever real insight, particularly the style of meditation I do called Vipassana, which was about, scanning the body, sensation. So it was an embodiment tool. And I realized I was operating very much in my head. I was stuck in that kind of fight, flight response. My nervous system was on edge. I was stressed out. And when I went back to the environment, I was working in television, presenting a current affairs show. I realized that I was like, I don't have to react anymore to the things that made me stressed out, that made me angry, that made me upset. Suddenly, because I'd done this meditation, I could feel what my body was saying. It was like, I feel uncomfortable. And instead of like using that as an excuse to respond, to react to the situation, I sat with it and I said, why am I uncomfortable? And I realized it was actually the other person or the situation that was causing it. It wasn't the truth within. And so I was able to take a breath and come back and respond from a grounded place. So similar to what you're describing, brother, all these tools, particularly the ones that we teach, the Sacred Sons, for men all the way across the world, can really benefit us in being grounded. What grounded means is like calm, collected, cool-headed, so that we're not so always hot in the head, so or sensitive or tender, or just feeling the pressure of the world, the weight of the world on our shoulders. Grounded means that we can really carry that weight. We can give it back to the earth. And I love the way you spoke about working with nature. I think this is a really good way to introduce people to this concept of being grounded. One simple thing: take your shoes off, take your socks off, and just walk barefoot on the earth, and you may notice the difference.
Yes. Yeah, beautifully put. My question for you, Peter, would be, because my feeling is that men's work in the US, in the English-speaking world, is already much more out there than in the German-speaking world. Obviously, there are a few organizations here. There has been men's work, probably always has been, but it has not been so super popular. It's now slowly starting to come into our countries. And I guess you guys at the Sacred Sons are pretty much at the forefront of this entire development. So in your words, what would you say, what is this men's work thingy? What do you do? What do you mean by masculine alchemy?
Yeah. So the way that I would describe it is getting men from their heads into their hearts and into their guts. That's what I like to add. It's about, as opposed to always over intellectualizing the monkey mind, criticizing, judging, doubting, right? We're bringing these men from their heads into their hearts, which means feeling, which means expressing, which means actually setting an intention, having a goal, and following your heart to your purpose, right? And the reason why I talk about the gut is because it's about the intuition. It's about the feeling of where the instinct comes from, as opposed to go with what the mind is saying. How about we listen to what our body is saying? And more often than not, that's where the truth really lies, where we can really find our way in the world.
That is such a powerful one, like really feeling again. I noticed in myself, in my own past, but also in many, many guys that I've spoken to, that we tend to make decisions always from the heads, right? Because we're being taught that the intellect is like superior, and we rationalize and make decisions by logic and what seems to be optimal. But then again, we end up sometimes frustrated or dead unhappy, right? Because we're not listening to this thing called guts or gut feelings anymore. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Can I add something to that?
Please. That's what we're here for, brother. Go ahead.
This question is for you. This question is for anyone who's watching or listening. How often do you wake up and look at your phone straight away, right? How often is it the last thing that you look at before you go to bed? Many people would say yes, right? Myself included from time to time. And this is what I'm hearing when you're speaking about like the masculine, the left brain to some regard. It's about like constantly being engaged, constantly having to discern yes, no, black, white, put things into boxes, calculate. And this is something that we are so, as a society across the West and in some parts of the East as well, locked into technology. This exterior technology where, yes, the masculine is about like expansion, it's about growth, it's about development, it's about evolution. And yet in some ways that feminine, and I say feminine with a pinch of salt, I just like to use it as the polarity, as the opposite to this masculine. But the feminine can also be the feeling that we talk about at Sacred Sons. The idea of it, as opposed to like grab your phone first thing in the morning, how about you turn your phone off for 45 minutes and you go sit on the meditation cushion, or you go for a walk, or you paint, or you sing. Use those first moments and the last moments of the day to connect with something internal, something deep, something of significant, like something of meaning. And the way I express this is like, as opposed to just being so like masculine, constantly pushing forward, constantly going out there into the world, how about we take a look inside? We call it self-inquiry. Take a little look inside, journal, and use those moments to really reflect on what it is and where you're going. And that to me is harmony. That to me is balance. And it's so important in this modern world that we turn off the phone and sometimes we turn ourselves on.
Sweet. Yeah. Turning yourself on. Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. Like the first moments in the morning and the last moments in the evening. I noticed a couple of years ago when my own path to self-development started, what kicked it off was basically that I woke up in the morning feeling unhappy, going to bed in the evening feeling unhappy. And that was the clearest sign, man, there's something you need to look at in your life, right? And that's how it started for me personally. So I'd be interested, what got you started on this path to men's work, the work that you do now? I mean, obviously you just mentioned you also do other types of work also with the sisters and intimacy, but what brought you onto this path?
Question. Interestingly, saying about turning the phone off and turning myself on, it was very much that. It was that I was unconscious of my feelings. I was unconscious of how I was operating in the world. That turn on is like, has two meanings, like intimacy, into me you see. I was seeking intimacy out there in the world through connecting with others, having casual hookups, alcohol, partying. And at the age of about, must have been 23, I decided that I needed a change. I was unhappy. I was going out constantly seeking for something outside of myself. And I finally realized that there must be something in that wasn't quite happy, that wasn't quite at peace. So I went to Peru, as some people do, looking for all the answers in the Amazon, and found myself living with the Shipibo, one of the native tribes.
Wow.
And sat with a plant medicine called ayahuasca. Mm-hmm. And that was the beginning of my journey, nearly 15 or so years ago now.
Whoa. That's been a long path. Man. Amazing. Yeah, so powerful how these plant medicines can push so many of us onto our paths, right? I mean, I have a lot of very dear memories with the plant medicine as well, also with the Shipibo tribe, even though it's still a big dream of mine to finally sit with them down there in their own Pachamama one day, right? But yeah, it's been amazing what these medicines can show us. And then again, also I'm noticing that in so many ways and retreats that I've been to or workshops, just like this immersion where we met, that in so many ways, it doesn't even need the plant medicine sometimes, right? That even in the community of people, there is so much medicine. And I think that's even one of the things that you say at Sacred Sons, right? In the Brotherhood, there's the medicine. Can you speak to that a little bit? Like this power of community?
Yeah, brotherhood is the medicine, is what we say. And you're right, many people find this work through plant medicine, through various modalities, from Kundalini to breath work,
Yeah.
to yoga, to martial arts. And what I found actually is that when in these circles, when with other men who feel what you're going through, who are there, who are present, who are compassionate, who are empathetic, just the witnessing alone, just being seen in my pain, in my grief, in my power, in my joy, gives it so much like significance. Suddenly I have like a structure, a framework, that masculine to work with. I have brothers I can call and I can hold me to account. Yeah, did you do the thing you promised the circle? Oh shoot, yeah, no, I've got to do that. And I also have the feminine, I have the playfulness, I have the creativity to be with these men and feel free and judgment free and able just to be free to express who I am. And it's those two elements, the seeing and the being, the human and the spirit, that I find brotherhood is the medicine really sums up. And that's why it doesn't have to be some going into the jungle, going for this rite of passage, like outside of our comfort zone. We can have it in our own backyard, in our own city, at an immersion.
Right, right. Well, especially also thanks to people like you who bring this medicine and these modalities into the cities, right? So like a few years ago, I didn't even know about men's work. My first men's circle was probably around 2020 or so in Mexico. That's where I ran into the first men's circle. And I was like, wow, this is so powerful. I never thought this would be possible just from talking, you know? Like, and it was so powerful just to witness other brothers like in their process, as you mentioned, but also to be able to share my own process without fear of being judged. I think that's the super critical part, right?
That to me is the biggest part of masculinity. Just to step in there, what we talk about a lot of the time is like it's the modern man, right? And there's so many different ways we can have this conversation. We could talk about toxic masculinity. We can talk about an effeminate man, the emasculated man, the emasculated woman. However, what I really hear in what you're saying is like the ability for a man to hold space, to witness, to be able to just listen without trying to rescue, without giving unsolicited advice. I know that now in partnership, sometimes I just want to help my partner solve her issue, and yet that's not always what's required. Sometimes it's just about listening, nodding, asking questions, letting her express it and leave it on the table so that she hasn't got anything left inside of her that will be an issue later on. And so that's what I'm hearing, brother. It's the idea that like when you're in a safe container, when the agreements have been set by the facilitator, we're going to go into this consciously, that we're not going to hold any judgments, or we're going to be aware of our judgments, and that you have a safe judgment-free space to speak what's in your heart, what's in your mind, then suddenly we have the permission to be authentic. And there's something really beautiful that I heard the other day. It's like the hardest thing on this planet is being something that we're not. It's wearing a mask. It's performing. It's trying to prove something. It's being inauthentic. And actually, our birthright is to be real. It's to speak truth. It's to love. And in these spaces, they're real like breeding grounds. They're incubators for that wild expression of manliness.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty poetic, this wild, this wild expression of manliness. And I saw it. I mean, I saw it in circles. I saw it in this immersion, how beautifully so many men were expressing. Also, to me, it felt very good to be able to express in a way that's also different from how I express maybe in my own circle of friends who know me since like ages. Because even there, you know, there's like so many things people know me for being this person, or there's that memory attached to my face or to my clothes or to my taste of music or whatever, you know. But in these circles, when I come in and I can be like just the way I feel in this very present moment, that is so powerful. And then, as you also just mentioned, bringing that into our relationships, I notice also makes such a huge difference in basically every relationship with any person. If I can be authentic, and if I can allow another person to be authentic as well, if we can invite it, which is not so easy, isn't it?
It actually is as easy as it sounds. It really, truly is.
Ah.
And I'd love to get your perspective. How has life been since you came back from the Berlin immersion?
How has life been? I would say reignited discipline and commitment to myself, I'd say. So we spoke a lot about, I mean, in my mind, I know a lot of things that I have to do. But the question is, do I always show up for myself, right? When it gets busy, when it gets tough, when the weather is shitty, when I don't feel like it. And that's been something I've really been pushing through with, like every single day, moving, checking my priorities, my intentions for the day, speaking affirmations in the mirror, even the way you showed us. Like, I'm like, yeah, it's such a powerful practice. Like, yeah, every morning and just embody it. And sometimes I still am low energy in the morning because it was a short night or whatever, but I feel like, but it's still there. This power is always there. And I like to talk to people about it. So I share it with my friends also. And they are noticing, oh, there is a change taking place in this guy. It's been taking place in me within the last couple of years, but now more and more and more and more. I'm also confident to share this with my friends, because in the beginning I was more like, okay, I'll do it for myself. And like, not everyone has to see what I'm doing here, you know? But now more and more like, no, I'll share it with other people also. So may they feel inspired to look for the same within themselves. Yeah.
And that's exactly it. And there's a word for this in Vipassana meditation. It's called Dharma. It's like our life path. It's of being of service, right? And once we get that how can I call it? That like magic juice, right? That medicine. Suddenly it's like, oh, like I would love for people in my life to experience this and to see how powerful it can transform our lives for the better. And I've noticed more and more people inviting their brothers, their friends, their family, just their whole community to these kind of events and trainings that we do. So it speaks for itself. And the reason why I asked, Roger, because I saw you at this event being so important. You're what we call a permission giver. This is a true born leader, someone who's there really living it, walking and talking in integrity. As they put one foot forward, they're really like owning and being sovereign to this moment. Now, sovereignty for some might be a concept. It's like, oh, what does that mean to be a king? And actually, it's about being deciding how your life looks, having some authorship, right? Like you said, checking your priorities. What's my goals? What are my objectives? What are the intentions for the day? How is it going to look? How am I going to show up? How am I going to serve? How am I going to support my community, my loved ones? And it's from people like yourself who really are leading the charge, who are changing this world for the better, because there are a lot of men, no judgment, just an observation, that are still boys. And they're still hurt. They're still sensitive. A lot of these men, boys, are in positions of power, brother. A lot of them are politicians. A lot of them are CEOs. And that's the reason why they built up all this, all their walls, ultimately, these masks of being important and having lots of money and influence, is because they're insecure. And actually, we, at the work that we do, this masculine alchemy, bring the little boy in. We love the little boy. We have those moments where we play and we're fighting each other. And it's like being on a playground again, but with respect and reverence and having agreements and being like, okay, you're going to hit these 90%. Let me hit you 90%. Let's work out what that feels like. Let's go to 100, right? When we have the boxing gloves on. And so these tools are what brings these boys back into the hearts, back into the folds, back into the light, so that the little boy isn't hurt as much, isn't wounded, and isn't reacting, responding, behaving like a little tyrant, which many men still do at this moment.
Right. Yeah. That actually brings me back to one of the lines that I heard during this weekend immersion that really stuck with me. I noted it down in my notebook. And I was, I don't know who said it, but someone said, a real leader allows other men to step into their leadership. And that was something that like really deeply resonated with me. I was like, wow, that's so powerful. Because usually as we grow up as boys, we're like, hey, I'm the leader. That means I call the shots and you do what I want, right? So, I mean, that's the kind of perception many people seem to have about leadership. That's what it means to be a leader. You call the shots, and then you get the girls and the status and the money and whatever. But there's so much more to it. And I would love to hear your opinion on what does leadership really mean? Maybe even using that quote or whatever else comes to mind. What does it mean for a man to step up into his leadership?
Yeah. Leadership for me is being of service, like really being clear about what it is that I'm here to bring, to provide, to support, to uplift the planet, the people, and so yes, lift up the people around you. Being a true leader is seeing the leader in all of us. And actually, it's being humble as much as it is being confident. There's these two aspects of leadership that I see in different ways. And it's those who really love the spotlight. And there's a sense of the performer. And sometimes it's those who like to be in the background. And there's a sense of that imposter syndrome. I don't know if you're familiar with that. A leader is able to walk both those lines.
Perhaps can you explain this imposter syndrome a little bit? Because this terminology, I think, in German language is not so easy to understand.
Yeah. So imposter syndrome is the idea of someone who has self-doubt, right? And they might be in a position where they question themselves. They're like, do I really deserve this? Am I good enough? Have I got the skill set or the talent? And very often, I'll speak for myself, I've experienced that. I'm like, really? Why all of a sudden am I talking to 20, 30 men in Berlin about life and how it's important to respect women? And I've learned that actually, the more I've got out of my own head, got out of my own way, left the ego at the door, it's actually not me. It's more this idea of the leader, this archetype of the king, of the sovereign. You can say it's spirit, you can say it's the universe, you can say it's life coming through me, but it's important to recognize that we are human, that we have these aspects, the insecurities and the false confidence in some ways, and just to be able to check ourselves. So yes, uplift others, and at the same time, a leader is someone who uplifts themselves, doesn't tear themselves down, is realistic, and is able to say, okay, that's a blind spot, that's a shadow, this is where I require some improvement. And the final thing, which is really present for me at the moment, is feedback. A leader is someone who's open to feedback, who's able to hear where there's good, I don't want to use the word advice because I'm not a massive fan of advice, where there's good areas to pick up on. And then the person who's able to hear where there's a projection, where someone's telling you, oh, I don't like this about you. And I've had to sit with that and be like, that's them. That's something they don't like about themselves and they're projecting on me. And I'm okay to take the criticism where it really resonates. And I'm also okay to leave the stuff that doesn't resonate.
Aye. Yeah, beautifully put, ma'am. I love that line that you just said, that leadership truly is about service. Because when we look out into the world and how leadership is commonly understood, for many people, it seems to be like the shadow side of the leader, being more like the tyrant, right? I want to be at the top of the pyramid so I can take everything for myself. And then, but the opposite is, okay, I want to be at the top, but being at the top means great responsibility, and I come from a point of service. Now, this really turns around a lot of human action that we see out there on the planet, and also possibly of the devastation that we cause on this planet, out of which a lot is caused, I feel, by us guys, by us men. Like who's cutting down the rainforests, like hunting down the last elephants, pouring oil into oceans, dropping bombs on children's hospitals, like all that stuff. Who's doing that stuff, right? And I feel like this is really where authentic and real leadership comes into place. That's why I'm such a huge fan of this work that you guys are doing. And I would love to hear your opinion.
I have a sprinkle.
Go ahead, please. Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. And I think this is you're about to ask me the question, and I was already there. So apologies for interrupting. What it feels like is actually those who are in positions of power love the power. They're in some ways addicted or obsessed, and it's become like a a symptom of their sickness, right? And yet it's the ones who don't want to be in positions of power that can really have a big impact, a big influence. And as you're sharing, what I was feeling was it's artists. And I really truly believe that we're all artists, right? I was having a conversation about this today or yesterday. It's the idea of like creativity, like really tapping into what I was speaking to, that leadership, that sovereignty, being of service. How can my art, how can my life's work, my masterpiece, my operandus, the idea that like my dharma can really help those around me, how can that become my profession, what I make a living from? And if people are starting to lead themselves as opposed to look to other leaders, look to influencers to get some inspiration or to be directed, guided by, then we would have far more, like you're speaking to, the wars and the bombs and the conflict, we'd have a far more peaceful and unified, compassionate reality, because we're doing the inner work. We're facing that internal struggle by creating art, by saying, okay, this is where I lack some skills, or this is where I've had some pain, and we could turn that pain into purpose, like artists do. Like they turn their tears into hit songs, right? So like, how can we do that with our life? That's my question.
Lovely, lovely. I like that one. That really resonates with one of the books also that I'm reading right now. I'm reading Rick Rubin, The Creative Act. You probably know Rick Rubin, right? This creativity guy behind all the other creatives. And it's amazing. And he says exactly the same thing. Look, everything in life is art. And when I'm reading this book, I found that, wow, this is one of the most spiritual books I've ever read. Even though this guy never mentions spirituality or any spiritual terms. It's just, he talks about art and creativity, but what he says, man, has a journey of the soul and wild expression through this human body, right?
Yeah, that's beautiful. There's also something I heard he does, and he's working towards, because he's a producer, right? He makes music, he works with the other artists. Life is about collaboration. You saw our team in Berlin, you saw how grounded we all were. That takes effort, that takes team effort. Us all syncing up, talking, having meetings, doing practices like meditation, various exercises, physical drills together so we can show up at the immersion in a good way. Similar to what Rick Rubin is saying, you know, he's got life experience. He's been working for 50 years or so, making music, making hit music, right? And he works with other musicians, other artists. And I heard him say that he's working towards being in a studio and not even having to use language, not even having to use his words, just vibing with someone energetically and looking at them and just a little gesture, they get it and they make the shift, and suddenly the melody, the harmony is more in resonance with the feeling in the room. And I guess what I'm speaking to, why I'm sharing that, it's like the same when we're leaders. It's the same when we're out there in the world. For me, it's Wu Wei, this idea of like effortlessness. How can we bring more of that effortlessness to our lives, where we're not constantly pushing, we're not constantly in the masculine, always having to expand, always having to conquer, always having to be out there doing something, being seen, being admired or acknowledged, like these people who are obsessed with power? How can we just be the humble servant, quiet, still, and just allow the world to work with us? The question is not what is it that you want from life, but what is it that life wants from you?
Ooh, that is a very powerful one. That is a very powerful one. And I'd like to invite everyone listening or watching to take this question and sit with it for a little bit, because it's so powerful, right? Changing the perspective, just this tiny bit, and how it can allow us to come back into flow, right? Flow with life. That's in fact one of the lessons I'm also learning from my Tai Chi and Qigong practice at the moment, that like, once we start to let go and release and allow the pressure to be and the tenseness to be, and we can breathe with it and just be with it and accept it, suddenly stuff becomes easier. And there's a translation to life, I guess, once we start to take out our resistance, right? When we lower our resistance and just allow stuff to flow through us. And yeah, that's something that I felt in you also, brother, very, very intensely. That's why I wanted to have you on this podcast also, because I felt like the way you were facilitating, you had this beautiful mix of so many characteristics. So there was this strength, but also this tenderness, and you were singing, and we were jamming, and we were fighting. There were so many things in this, in these just 2 short days, right? Like so many emotions and vibes at the same time. How do you do it yourself? I mean, like what do you do when you are in resistance, when life hits you hard?
I have an interesting anecdote. So we were talking about plant medicine earlier, and I've tended to limit, or I've learned that actually it's not my only path. Actually, it kind of played its part in my life, and I feel very grounded. I feel very in my body, heart-led, that plant medicine isn't necessary as much. Last year, I was called to go to Africa. My mother's Ethiopian with Middle Eastern heritage. My father's British Guyanese. My grandmother's from near Manchester in the north of England. So I have mixed heritage, and yet Africa, my blood, my melanin was calling me back. And I went to be initiated into a plant medicine, if not the strongest on the planet, called Iboga in Gabon. And it was one of the scariest experiences. Very rarely do I have like a real fear of doing something. Normally I'm able to process, this is for me, not against me. Life is gifting me this blessing. And I sat on the airplane going to Gabon, and I was like, what am I doing? I don't know who I'm working with. I've just found this person through a recommendation online that someone sent me their number. I have no contact when I'm there. When we go into the bush where I'm spending 3 weeks, there's no running water, there's no electricity, there's no internet. I'm living in a temple where there's very few villagers or people around, and very isolated. And the first night of the first ceremony, I lay in this really uncomfortable room, super hot, high levels of malaria, and had this mosquito net with holes in it. I wasn't allowed my mosquito medication. There was fire ants crawling down the wall, so they threw petrol to stop them from biting my legs. So I'm sweating. There's no fan. I'm smelling petrol. I'm scared. I don't know where I am. I don't know who I would be able to contact if anything happened. It's probably the scariest, the most dangerous, ridiculous circumstance I ever found myself in. And in that moment, I just started to laugh. I was like, this is so ridiculous. It's never been worse than this. I've never been so vulnerable that I had to laugh in the face of adversity. And in that moment, it was like the biggest light bulb switched on in my head. And I was like, this is now my approach to the challenges. When life punches me in the face, like you said, when things are hard, when it feels like I can't go on any longer, I just laugh and I say, thank you. Thank you so much for gifting me what we're calling blessing, this blessing and this lesson, this ability to get stronger. Because without resistance, just like going into the gym, free weights, bodybuilding, without resistance, we aren't going to get stronger. We need growing pains. The seed in the soil needs the crushing of the earth, the darkness, the dampness, the confusion, like the caterpillar in the cocoon, to become the butterfly, to burst out of the ground like a beautiful oak tree. So that was kind of my reasoning for now, being that when things get hard, I welcome it. And I'm really grateful that you could spot that, because that is one of my greatest strengths, is making the most of every moment.
Wow, that is so powerful. That is so powerful, man. I've heard stories about Iboga, man. And I was like, I've tried a couple of plant medicines as well. And I was like, maybe that's the very last thing I'm going to do one day, maybe. But holy cow, man. Yeah, use a brave man. Use a brave man.
Yeah, I would say if people are getting the calling and it keeps coming up in their lives, similar to ayahuasca, similar to Sacred Sons, men's work, you keep hearing about it, then there's probably a message there for you.
Yeah, yes. But I love this way that you can laugh about, or in the face of adversity. I mean, there's also this saying amongst the biologists, right? That or people who study evolution and these things, and they look at species and they say no species are endowed with anything that they do not need for their survival, or that is beyond what they would need in their physical life. And then I've been wondering so many times, why do humans have humor? And apparently not only humans, also like dogs and monkeys, they seem to have humor. And this is, I love it. I love it because it's apparently, obviously, it's one of the ways the divine speaks to us, right? And yeah, I find these moments lovely when we can just laugh about these things. It's just opening up so much.
That's beautiful, man. Thank you for sharing that. And I really resonate with that. It's the idea of the cosmic joke, right? That
Right.
everyone, well, people can take things really seriously, and suddenly it's like, it's not that serious. It's not that big an issue. And, you know, obviously I'm talking with quite broadly. You know, I don't want to disrespect or insult anyone who is going through something very difficult, very challenging. And I'm speaking from my own experience. I'm not speaking from anyone else. Maybe you've got some health issues or family issues, etc. It's just an interesting way to reframe things. As opposed to maybe saying you're going to laugh at it, how about you can find some gold, some silver lining to that cloud, right? What is it that this is gifting you? How can you be emboldened, empowered by this challenge?
I love that. Yeah, that is very powerful. At the end of the day, it's always just a little reframing or switch in perspective, right? That allows us to really learn from what life throws at us, and what makes this entire roller coaster ride quite enjoyable at the end of the day. Once we're through, obviously, sometimes when we're like deep down, it's like, oh shit, man, I better be now here. But but when we come back out, then wow, there's so much in there, right?
Can I ask you a quick question?
Please go ahead. Yes.
Are you aware of the things that were difficult, the things that you felt maybe would have like killed you or broken you down that you may never have recovered from? Are you now aware that those things are why you're here today?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest ones for me definitely was what happened last year, and that's also what I shared among you brothers at the immersion, right? This entire accident, going through this entire story of a person close to you dying, and like the entire process, and I felt completely overwhelmed. I felt close to breaking point. I did not, and when I fell, like everyone came and helped me. And now there's so much more depth in me and also capacity to feel into other people. And I am, in fact, and it sounds weird sometimes to myself, but I am in a way grateful because I was given so much there at the point where I thought this was the toughest moment ever. So yes, yeah. Absolutely.
And let that be something a listener can take away with it, right? That the experience that you had, when I remember you sharing it, it brought me to tears. Like even now talking about it, like I feel goosebumps, knowing how challenging that was. And I remember sharing with you, brother, that like I saw how you'd really like come to terms. You'd come to understand, understand, as I like to say, you come to understand that experience and its impact and its influence. And really, as I mentioned earlier, you're a permission giver, you're a leader. You're someone who's able to really turn that grief, that pain into words that can really inspire, that can uplift, that can shift someone's perspective. It doesn't always have to be us who experiences the hardships. It can be through someone else that we learn through their lens, their reality, how to change, how to jump timelines in some cases.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it was intense, and it was lovely also sharing that with you guys, and also what came out of it, also with a couple of the brothers when we spoke in between the workshops, like during breaks, and the conversations that unfolded from it, right? And that also, this is one of the things that I've noticed in all these kinds of workshop environments the most. Like the more we are able to open up and share about like these tough moments in our own lives, the more we give ourselves the permission, the more we give other people give themselves the permission to open up as well, right? And that's what I felt is like one of the strongest things that can happen between humans. That's why I love these kind of circles so much.
And this is what I was speaking about intimacy earlier, and I feel like this is a good way to close this particular conversation is the idea that I've learned so much that I was hurt. I was a little boy in a man's body, that I didn't want to feel the pain that I felt as a kid. I felt unseen. I felt treated, disrespected. That little things in my life, from being dismissed by friends or being rejected by a woman, started to make me believe they were true. These stories. And what I realized is that I was constantly looking for external approval, was looking for someone to love me, someone to give me meaning, someone that would empower me. And yet what I've learned through what you're sharing, this idea of actually the more I express what's inside, the vulnerability, the more strength I have. And actually that was me being intimate with myself. Suddenly those little conversations I'd love to have with a partner, I was having for me. I was able to express those things. You know what, I'm feeling insecure right now. People are like, oh cool, like thank you for sharing that. Me too. You're a permission giver. Suddenly I feel safe, so I feel comfortable. I can speak about my issues with you. And it just became like a momentum, a ball side rolling, and picking up this this energy. And suddenly, like, I am here today, recognizing that the most intimate I've been with myself, and I can now be that for my partner. I've called in someone that I can really love truly. And this is why, as much as men's work is important in this day and age, it's also women's work. It's also family work. It's also planet work. This impacts everything. And I now, like with Sacred Sons in September, we're doing our first ever men and women's event called Convergence 9 in Washington, near Seattle. So anyone who's listening and feels called to work with men and women and see that sacred union coming together, check out the Sacred Sons website.
Wow. Amazing, amazing, amazing. That sounds lovely, man. Peter, thank you so much, man. I know it's a very busy time for you, so I appreciate it so much that you made this time in your calendar available for us to have a little chat. I would love to talk to you for more hours, but perhaps on another time. Yeah. Is there anything else you would like to say about your work or Sacred Sons, or where people can connect with you, perhaps before we part?
Yeah, so we have a bunch of things coming up from our in-person trainings. So we have Copenhagen immersion on the 6th and 7th of July. We also have our Lisbon immersion on the 13th and 14th of July. Any other dates and events working with me one-on-one, or any of the things I'm doing here in my own hometown, London, check out my Instagram at Men's Work Coach, all one word. And I'm on Peter at mensworkcoach.com email, and my website is mensworkcoach.com as well. Thank you, Dorja, for a beautiful opportunity to reconnect, and super stoked to build this friendship with you, actually, because I really do feel we've got the beginnings of a beautiful connection, and yeah, super stoked to see where that goes.
Love that. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Mucho. And we will link everything in the show notes, all the contacts for Mr. Peter, the Men's Work Coach. Thank you so much, brother, and all the best on all your paths, and looking forward to connecting with you soon. All the best.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.